Contrary to popular belief, history does not repeat itself. The story of our planet was not predetermined. There was no air of inevitability to it. And the story of life does not speak to us of a linear progression from primitive to sophisticate. Instead, its shape has been carved out by the accumulation and the loss of information, genetic and cultural, creating the illusion of relentless progress. Clive Finlayson. Welcome to Warfare, Advancement, and Revisionism. My name is Preston Floyd, and as always, I am your host. I'd like to thank everyone who's been listening so regularly, and I hope you've been enjoying the show and these last few episodes specifically. This week, there are some points I want to go over based on some feedback, and just reiterate some points I made prior before we get to our next group of focus or area of study. So last week we discussed that the peoples that were speaking the Proto Niger Congo language or languages. There are a few points I want to reiterate about this. The first thing is that some of the divisions I have talked about may not be happening yet, but they will be happening soon, from 10,000-ish BC. Also, it is a debate that the language spoken by the Proto-Mande is a branch of the Niger-Congo family. If it is the oldest one. If it is not related, then the Proto-Mande people broke away from the rest African peoples earlier than we're currently have evidence of. It is for this reason that I believe they were the people occupying the southwestern area of the most recent Green Sahara. I think somewhere around the borders of modern-day Mali and Mauritania. They probably would have been situated along either a northwestern branch of the Niger River, a northern branch of the Senegal River, or along the Tamanrasset River, none of which exist current day because of course, the Sahara drying up. In fact, they probably made that migration, or migrated out of this area several times. Each time the Sahara became green or greener than what it is now. But whatever the exact case is, we'll eventually return to the descendants of the Proto-Mande peoples in future episodes. Now, though, I want to focus on other branches of the Proto-Niger-Congo family. This week, we're going to focus on the Kordofanian branch. Now, this group has its own difficulty in kind of establishing a provenance. Kordofanian is used to describe languages that belong to several tribes that live mostly in and around the Nuba Hills. And these are located in the modern-day country of Sudan. The issue this causes is that not all languages spoken in that area are Proto-Niger-Congo. But they're still Kordofanian, and both the Proto-Niger Congo and non-Proto-Niger Congo branches have had influence on each other. So basically, Kordofanian is an umbrella term that discusses languages in this specific area and that have kind of melded each other. But basically, there's like one or two groups that speak a Kordofanian language that did not originate from the Proto-Niger tongue, and then the rest of the Kordofanian languages do descend from the Proto-Niger group. And another thing that kind of makes it harder to kind of study and go over these people is they do not, as far as I can tell, I cannot find any references or information on kind of their original native religions. of these groups. They have been thoroughly converted by Islamic preachers and groups interacting with them through trade and conquest, that kind of thing. So unfortunately, I cannot find any information about what the original Kordofanian religion was, or even like the various groups. I can't even find any kind of syncretic practices or old things, kind of like how the West Africans that we discussed last week, the Proto Mande, and the people that descended from them, how a lot of them use masks and ancestor worship have kind of been incorporated into their specific flavor of Islam. I can't find any specific mention of any traditions or ceremonies that they kind of incorporated into their practice of Islam. So it's a little hard to get a clear picture of these people. Another difficulty is, if you look at a map, the southern border of Sudan, where these people are mostly situated, they are not close at all to where the rest of the early Proto-Niger branches ended up. They're across the continent. These languages, are people that speak these languages, are focused almost entirely around, if you look at a modern map, the middle part of southern Sudan, not South Sudan, but right along the border of Sudan and South Sudan. They are kind of in the center of southern Sudan, north of the South Sudan border. And I know that's confusing, but that's unfortunately what we have to work with. Most of that area is, there are some small kind of streams and rivers in the area, but it's very rare, mostly due to the rainy season. It's the Sahel, basically. It is the savanna plains in Sudan. So what probably happened is that these people kind of were in the eastern part of the Niger river system, maybe originating somewhere around kind of Lake Chad when it was much larger. And then as that lake started to dry up, and probably due to competition with the other people around that area, they, instead of moving south closer to the Congo, they moved east, and probably ended up around some of those other groups. And the people that speak today, I guess, the descendants of these people, they are, I think the Niger Congo groups are pretty formally classified into, I think, three main branches. There's Katla, there's Rashad, and then there's Tolodi Haban, which is then broken down into Lodi and Haban. And there's another, I think, a small Atlantic Congo group that moved in later. And it's considered Kordofan, even though it probably came from a later branch of the Niger Congo group. And this isn't a large number of speakers in terms of this. I think, I don't even know if they, as a group, like all of them together, is over 1 million. Which, if you consider where they live, I mean, that makes a lot of sense. It's not the most fertile and easy to live in environment, even when times are quote unquote good. Now, the next group I kind of want to talk to, or mention and go over, is what you would call the Atlantic Congo. Now, this is a very large part of the Niger Congo languages. If you remember when I mentioned last week about most linguists believing that the more derivations or derivatives of a language that exist in the area tends to mean that the language has been spoken there longer, where we're going to be focusing on now does see quite a large amount of dialects spoken. So obviously this is probably where, I guess the language kind of originated first. So for the Atlantic Congo, you have the Atlantic languages, which are, if you look at a map today, they're the ones that are spoken all along the West African coast from the mouth of the Senegal River, that feeds directly out into the Atlantic Oceans and kind of faces towards, I believe it's the I forget the island chain. It's not the Canaries, but I want to say it's the Canaries, but it's not. It's where kind of Europeans, I think, set up initially, like a lot of their first outposts when they were exploring the African coast. But regardless, most of these languages are spoken today by Fula people, I think is the name of the group. And they're kind of buffeted now by the Mande speakers. And then as you kind of turn that one that goes directly from the Senegal, Gambia, then you have a little group of speakers that are known as the Kru languages, and that's KRU. Then you have on the coast going back towards kind of the interior in the Baida Biafra, you have, I believe it is known as Kwa languages. And then you have the Volta Niger speakers, the Benue Congo, and then you have Bantoid languages, and then you have the Bantu languages. So, I mean, you have, 6, 7, just along the coast, and then you have some in the interior, things like Gur and Sinufu. And please keep in mind that even though those are the kind of majority of languages spoken in those regions, they are not the only languages. There are overlaps between all the groups I've mentioned, kind of where they kind of butt up against each other. And there may be, ethnic groups more related to, themselves, that they don't even speak the same language anymore just because it was more efficient, or because of conquest or trade or things like that. So it's not that cut and dry, but that's just me trying to give a brief overview of the peoples who are kind of going to emerge or are emerging at 10,000 BC. So that's just kind of what I wanted to go over. Now, there are a couple of more groups that I need to discuss. And like Mande or Kordofanian, they do not fit neatly into this kind of overarching mega family. And these are peoples who are kind of grouped with the Niger-Congo families, probably more because of their location rather than any kind of etymology or linguistic reasons. And those big groups are Dogon, Ijo, and I believe the other one was Dafaka groups. And they are very much surrounded by the Niger-Congo and Mande peoples, and they have very ancient languages. So again, we're talking if they are not part of the Niger-Congo family, then they are very early, break-off groups. They've been speaking their languages for quite a long time. It's before there's been any way to kind of trace them and connect them to the other languages. And these are not huge groups. I know the Dogon, they only have about 600,000 speakers, and it's broken into like a dozen different languages. So they have not had the easiest time competing with their neighbors. And then again, that's stuff we're going to go into in future episodes. I know there is some talk that kind of what happened with some of those Kordofanian languages happened in reverse, that maybe some of the Dogon people migrated far to the west from the east, and they ended up there. And that's something we'll probably get into in, I believe it'll be the episode, or the group of episodes after the next one, when we discuss the Nilo-Saharan languages. But as for the Atlantic Congo peoples, or the Proto Atlantic Congo peoples, we can't get any kind of, a reconstruction of their religion, or at least I wasn't able to kind of determine any kind of overarching commonality between these peoples. And again, there's a lot of these peoples. I mean, again, we talked about how the language has diversified so much. These people have, of course, diversified in other ways, and that includes religion. And a lot of important factors in religion comes from environment. So if obviously, if there's not a commonality between environment, while you're separated, there's probably not going to be a commonality in religious or spiritual practices. But I kind of got a couple of current day traditional beliefs from a couple of these different groups, and there is some overlap when it comes to other groups. Specifically, I believe it's the Timne people, who are part of the Atlantic branch of the Atlantic Congo. These people live in, I think, modern day Sierra Leone and Guinea. And a lot of them now today are either Muslims. Most of them are Muslims. And there is a smaller number of Christians in the group, but they do have some traditional beliefs that have been passed down. In fact, they have a creator, God, a supreme being, and there are lesser deities under him. And I think the term is Kuru Masaba. And that's kind of related to a phrase of another neighboring group that we'll get into later, that is not in the same language family. They have secret societies, which is similar to some of the Proto-Mande peoples. But we're going to go into more detail with that later, because again, I'm not too convinced that there is a lot of commonality. And I think at 10,000 BC, a lot of the practices that show up later are not being practiced yet. But another group is that kind of has its own form of religion, are the Bijago people. They also kind of are in that Guinea-Bissau area. They have they live in kind of mangrove swamps, and they have a very different society than a lot of other groups around them. They're very matrilineal. They have kind of a very animistic relationship to nature. Trees are very important to them. Again, we talked about matrilineality. You'll see that a lot, especially when it comes to a lot of agrarian societies, which they're not in yet. But they also revere certain types of fauna, things like manatees, sea turtles. They're very important to them, and very powerful creatures. So they, you're getting away from the Sahara and the steppes, or not the steppes, the savannah. The steppes are very far away. But things like Alans, they're not I mean, they would respect them, obviously, but they're not a huge part, at least as far as I can tell, in their religious beliefs. Which I think makes complete sense, because while these people are hunter-gatherers, the same way the Central Africans and the South Africans and Southeastern Africans are at this time frame, they are a different kind of hunter-gatherers. Again, like the Congo peoples, they have fish in their diet, or seafood. They have access to a different group of resources that they don't have in the South. Which is important to point out, because hunter-gatherer is an accurate term, but it's also extremely broad. It doesn't kind of give any kind of division or description to how people are actually surviving. And spoiler alert for some future episodes, some of these Niger-Congo speakers are going to be the ones that discover agriculture in this part of the world. And they will, of course, spread it around to their neighbors, either through force or through just trade and discussions. Not everyone's going to take to it. There are still going to be those living a more traditional foraging lifestyle, but it is something that springs up on its own in this area. It's discovered independently. And we will get to that in a few episodes. It'll be a little while before we get back to Africa to discuss it, because it emerged somewhere else first. But again, it is discovered independently by one of these groups of people, and I'll be able to go into more details on more of these kind of splinter groups, or these descendant groups. It's kind of hard to cover right now because, again, there's not as much division at 10,000 BC as I've been making it sound. But it is going to happen soon, and unfortunately, just the way, I've kind of decided to structure the podcast, we won't be able to come back to Africa until most of these groups have split off. So I just kind of wanted to set the scene so you can keep in mind, as we're covering other areas, that while all that stuff is going on there, West Africa is seeing a kind of explosion and expansion of these Proto-Niger-Congo speakers and their neighbors, and they're kind of peopling and laying out territory that they control or that they migrate to and from. So just keep in mind, West Africa is doing its own thing. They are laying their own foundations for societies, civilization. They are developing their own brand of what will become state societies. But it's getting very far ahead of ourselves, and we'll be back to these peoples right around the time they're getting ready to establish the first permanent settlements, because that affects very much Central and Southern Africa, and Southern East Africa too. But again, that's all for future episodes. Next week, it is the Memorial Day weekend. I have that Monday off, so I'm hoping to have a regular episode out at the normal time, and then possibly that Monday a bonus episode. I haven't decided if I'm going to do Alpha or 10,000 BC yet. It's probably going to be Alpha, but I'll let you guys. Obviously, you'll see the title when it's posted. Worst case, I think I might have 2 episodes out that Monday. I'm going to try to have the regular upload ready to go as well. But this episode was a little bit shorter than the last one, but then again, the last one was a little bit longer. I hope you've enjoyed. Please give me any feedback you have. If you have any questions, or if you felt like I wasn't clear, or if I was repeating myself, which of course I do a lot. I'm still Still getting used to this podcasting thing, so I am legitimately looking for any feedback, constructive feedback specifically, that anyone has. Please feel free to message me at waradrevpod@gmail.com, and of course you can also message me on Twitter. I do link the account to my Twitter in the episode description. But yeah, I'd like to thank you for listening. I hope you enjoy this episode, and I hope to hear from you in the future, and I hope you continue listening. Thank you. Have a good day. Goodbye.